I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Domann, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset.
We're going to talk about the NFL Combine, everything Combine, players, teams, coaches, media, agents. What goes on in Indianapolis during this 1 week extravaganza that the NFL's turned into a money-making machine? Let's first start out by covering the guys that matter the most, which are the players. This year, I believe there's 337 invitees to the NFL Combine. And those guys' dreams, hopes, and everything NFL in their minds is hinging on their performance at Indianapolis. So let's look at the reality, and let's look at their week. Let's look at the most critical phases of the Combine, where a guy can improve his stock the most or maybe hurt himself the most. What are some of his biggest challenges? Let's talk about the major elements that players get into when they go to the NFL Combine. The first thing is physicals. Really, when they get off the shuttle from the airport in Indy, they go straight to the hospital and they do MRIs, they do physicals, they do more MRIs, they get poked and prodded by multiple docs, most of them orthopedic docs, and they compare their medical records and injury history and surgery history. Doctors give them a medical grade. So some players will come out of Indianapolis this next week with a failure on their medical. And they probably won't know, their agent probably won't know. And when draft weekends comes in April, they won't get drafted and they'll wonder what happened. And it's because of their medical, because of their performance and production, not because of their workout performance at the Combine or Pro Day. It's going to be because the teams might love the player, but they don't want to take the risk of another injury and paying the guy to be on IR when they could sign or draft another player that's similarly situated performance-wise, doesn't have the injury history. The next thing that's pretty important for the players are the interviews, and there's two types of interviews. There's the 15-minute interview that teams get a limited quantity of those interviews, and the players it's almost like they're taking shots at the player from all different directions because there's typically 8 to 10 people from an organization, a room, interviewing one player. And they're just trying to find out more about him, how he handles pressure, how he responds to adversity or any skeletons in his closet. They want to find out if he's a good fit culturally with the organization. And then there's also the interviews with the position coaches that are more informal and casual. The first 2 nights the players are there, there's an hour or two for them to interact with the position coaches. The players also go through testing, IQ testing, personality profile testing, and some teams use that, some teams don't. Some teams value the football IQ of a player more than others, and it's also broken down by position. You can imagine that offensive linemen and quarterbacks have to be a little bit smarter than running backs and receivers, even though both those guys got to be pretty dang smart too. And then there's the workout, and the workout really has 2 phases. There's the lifting on day 2, and then there's the workout on day 4, and then day 3 is when the players get a little bit of a rest. So one of the biggest challenges for the players is staying loose, staying flexible, staying fit, staying in your routine when you might be training in the West Coast, you might be training in Florida, you fly into Indianapolis, it's usually kind of cold. They put you all through all those medicals, through all these interviews. NFLPA has a lot of consulting sessions with the players to teach them about the benefits and the role that the NFLPA will play in their careers. And it's a long day for the players. Every day is a long day. And then by the time you get to the 4th day, you're expected to go out there and perform. This year, for the first time, the workouts are going to be in the evenings, made for TV. So what you have is players that have been in a training curriculum in Phoenix, in Dallas, in LA, wherever it's been, and they've got their trainer. They're hydrated, they're limber, they have recovery days, they have speed days, they have drill days, they have all these things. And then they go to Indianapolis and everything kind of stops. So a handful of years of trainers started traveling to Indianapolis, setting up shop at the convention center so that the players during their downtime can come over and get rubbed down, stretched out. They can work on starts. They can work on recovery, all those type of things. So we have all these cottage businesses run by trainers at the convention center so that their players can stay mentally and physically in tip-top shape so that on day 4 when they run and they jump and they do all the things they have to do, they're ready to go. And then the last thing that's kind of not spoken about much is they do drug testing. And so one of the mornings, I think it might be day 2, they get those guys around 4 or 5 in the morning to pee in a cup so that they can see if there's any PEDs. So they're testing for performance-enhancing drugs, and they're also testing for recreational drugs. And so another way besides a medical failure that a player can actually, from the outside, look like he had a heck of a combine, performed extremely well, but then on draft day have a huge disappointment is either because of the medical failure or because of the drug testing failure. If a guy tests positive for a drug test, it always hurts. Going all the way back to Warren Sapp in the mid-early 90s with the Buccaneers, he fell. And it was all because of, a positive test for marijuana. What does a guy got to do to improve his stock the most? If a young man is getting on a plane tomorrow or the next day, all the way up until Friday, and then it's going to perform 4 days later in Indianapolis, depending on when they show up, what does he have to do to maximize his draft stock? Well, number one, it's positional. Quarterbacks and long snappers are not going to be evaluated the same. Defensive linemen and DBs are not going to be evaluated the same. So you're there, let's say, for example, let's just take a wide receiver. A wide receiver is going to be there with all the other top wide receivers in the nation. And the nice thing about wide receivers is, you can be 6'4", 230. You can be 5'9", $180. You can be somewhere in between. There's a position for you on the field because in the NFL, they're looking for mismatches and they're looking for different guys that have different skill sets. And sometimes the guy that might be a speedster that can stretch the defense has a more difficult time on speed cuts, where the smaller player might have difficulty stretching the defense, so you don't ask him to do that. You put him in the middle of the field doing the pivot routes, the whip routes, the speed outs that allow him to get in open space against the linebackers and DBs. Going back to what does a guy got to do? So let's say he's a receiver. Hands down, number one, he's got to run fast. Because in the NFL, they watch tape. They make their evaluations primarily on tape. But sometimes when you watch guys on tape, you might have a group of like 5 guys that you see the same. And so how do you differentiate 1 through 5 within that group? And the way you do it is with speed. Speed kills. Can't coach speed. Speed wins. And then you got the current Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs, with a couple guys with Hardman and Tyreek Hill that are just speedsters that put so much stress and pressure on defenses that's what everybody's looking for. So the NFL is kind of a copycat league. And what I mean by that is whoever wins the Super Bowl, whatever they got, we want. And so if you look at the Chiefs, they've got a big defensive lineman. They've got the honey badger, a playmaker. They've got a Mahomie that, there's only one of him, but everybody wants a quarterback like Mahomes. And then you want the weapons that he has. Who's going to be the next Travis Kelce? Where is he going to find a Tyreek Hill? Sammy Watkins, all those guys. Okay, everybody wants what wins. Just like for many years, everybody's wanted a Tom Brady. And the Patriots will win in year after year and 6 out of 9 times and 9 out of 20 years or whatever it's been. So the way a guy is going to improve his draft stock the most is in day 4, his workout, where he runs fast, especially if he's a skill guy. How else? Everybody knows that. It probably didn't surprise anybody. So let's hear from Chris Kuper, who has the unique position of being a former player that went to the NFL Combine, was drafted, and played a significant role for the Broncos as a starter, captain, and Pro Bowl alternate, and now is a position coach with the Broncos and goes to the Combine as an evaluator and a coach. Describe for our audience the difference between going as a player and what you're feeling, what you're trying to accomplish, what your fears are, what your mindset is, compared to when you show up representing the Dolphins or the Broncos and you're evaluating those same guys you were 10 years before.
Yeah. Well, what I did learn was, because of my specific situation, I did pretty good at the Combine. I thought that I had better number. I thought that I should have had better numbers. So just a quick conduit would be, those numbers do mean something, but they don't mean everything. So as a player going into it, those numbers mean everything to you, because you think, shoot, I ran a 5.01. I ran a 4.92 in training 2 days ago. Like, what is that going to do to my draft stock? Or so those things that you can wear yourself out on and go over the top and overcorrect. I think a lot of that stuff, people just want to see your physical ability and see what you're able to do. All the training helps, there ain't no doubt. The training really does help. And there's a little tricks you can pick up, but it's not the end all be all. It's not, and that's what I know as a coach. So when I go there as a coach, I'm not really watching the workout. I mean, I'll watch it, but I'm not. And this is me specifically. There's a lot of guys who go there because we all are going to get all the information. We're going to have from our own scouts that are hand timed. We're going to get from the NFL that is laser. We're going to get, and there's coaches who hand time on their own and record everything on their own. I'd really go and watch and see how they do it. Does it look really, really hard on a guy to get out of the stance and burst for 10 yards? Is it really difficult for them to transition in and out? What does that look like opposed to what is their time? Because I think there's more you can pick up, and usually it's on the tape after the Combine as a coach that I watch and see. A lot of times I won't even have the times. I'll just look and watch them and see, I'll go back and check and see what their time was. Yeah, that's what that should have been a good time, but the next guy might have a great time, and it looks like garbage. It's clunky. It's hard for him to bend and transition and all those things. So as natural as you can go into that and use your natural ability, it's gonna create positive evaluations, because, or negative, depending on what you might have some deficiencies or some things that don't work as well as others. But those things you can't work out. You can't go outside yourself to train for a Combine. It's such a small, it's a blip on the radar comparatively when you go down the road and you're a pro player.
The second way I believe that guys can do it is in their interviews, because it's where you really get an opportunity to interface with NFL coaches. And there's two types of interviews. There's the casual interviews a couple nights during the Combine where the players have some free time and they go over to the Union Station, which is connected to to the player hotel, and the position coaches are there. And so it's kind of almost like a business meet and greet environment where you might get an opportunity to talk to a coach for 2 seconds and just introduce yourself. You might have a 30-minute conversation with a coach, and it's off script. It's not put you on a couch and it's like in a laboratory like they do over at the team hotel with the GM, the head coach, the sports psychologist, the player engagement guy, a variety of different people. It might be 8, 9, 10 people from the same organization sitting there staring at one player, basically drilling with questions, and they get 15, 20 minutes to interview them. Now, these are casual, and I feel like both of those interviews are great opportunities for a player to improve his stock, to make an impression, understand why he's motivated, and how he's going to be potentially different than all the other guys, or particularly those 4 other guys that are in that group of 5, that the teams may see all the same. Let's jump to a previous interview with Duke Preston with the Buccaneers, who shares his strategy for getting beneath the surface of a player to find out if he has a growth or fixed mindset? You're going to go to Mobile next week and do the same thing, and then you're going to end up in Indianapolis, and we're going to get together for some shrimp and steak in Indy.
Absolutely.
What are you looking for, and how do you find it when you sit down with a young man? And you're not the guy that's evaluating their tape. You know, you could, but you don't. You evaluate their mind, you evaluate their motivations, their personalities, their characters. How do you do that? How do you get the best information? Because they're all coached up by their agents.
Right.
You know, they're coached up by the media. They're ready. They're ready for you.
Yeah.
And you probably get the same canned answers from most of the guys on the front ends of your interviews.
Right.
You know, tell me about yourself. What's your greatest weakness? All those type of things. In some respects, they're icebreakers, but they don't tell you anything.
Yeah. Right.
So how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing I'm looking for in Indy is you to pick up the check when we go eat. But
yeah, you got that.
I'm just kidding, man.
It's my turn.
I'm just kidding. So, no, I think the combine and these player evaluations they can be difficult because, like you said, I mean, guys have been, you know, coached and kind of groomed in terms of what to say and what not to say. But I'm pretty off script, man. I've done it for a while, and I've sought some guidance from, you know, a bunch of different resources, and then I've just kind of thought, like, all right, if I'm trying to find this, how do I get to that, right? So some of the characteristics, like I've already talked about, humility, a sense of honesty, and some of that is feel, you know, some of that is you know, asking a guy like, all right, you get drafted in the second round, they hand you $1.5 million signing bonus. What's the first thing you're going to buy? You know, and if that's a home for mom, if that's a car, if that's nothing, you know, I mean, that tells you something. But even that, you know, some of those things can be coached up. One of my favorite questions or things that I try to look for is guys that can think critically and problem solve. So I've developed a couple different riddles to get to that, where, you know, you're asking a guy to think on his feet and solve a problem, maybe an open-ended one, where they can show you how they think, right? I've even done stuff with the water cups on the table and filling up two and leaving the third empty, and, you know, asking guys to figure out how would you measure this and seeing just how they think on their feet. One of my other favorite ones is I'll ask for a word definition. You know, my favorite word definition that I ask for is I ask them to define the word ambiguous. I found it in a list of words that every high school senior should know. And so here's a guy that, you know, went through at least 3 years of college. And so I just asked, do you know what the word ambiguous means? And it tickles me because you're trying to make a clear definition for a word that means vague. So that makes me laugh. But, you know.
What's the best answer you've ever gotten from that question? That you can remember, or the worst, or the funniest?
Shoot. You know, I think with the word definitions, you know, you'll get guys that go, man, I don't read, man. Like, I don't know what any of that stuff means, you know, and they'll just kind of totally punt. You know, there's some other guys that will admit that, you know, they used, you know, they tried to befriend a couple cute girls in class to help them out. And, you know, those kind of things are always fun, because then you get a guy that really kind of starts showing you the truth of who they are. You know, I'll ask questions that kind of point to a growth mindset in a guy versus a fixed mindset in a guy. And the example of that is, you know, I'll ask a setup question and I'll say, are you any good at math? And usually guys will say, no, I'm not. So then I put them in a mindset where, you know, they're saying, I'm not good at math. And then I'll ask a question that's as simple as, like, do you know the square root of 9? Right? Like, that's not a math question, because you learn those in 4th or 5th grade and you never use them, but it's a memory question more than anything. And then certain guys, because they said they're not good at math, as soon as I finish the question, they say, yeah, I don't know. And then if you press them, come on, man, what do you think it is? I don't know, 3? And you go, yeah, you're right. And they go, I don't know. But they're telling themselves it's math. I'm not good at math. So therefore, whatever you say next, I'm not going to know. and that would point to a fixed mindset. I'm a corner. All I play is press. If you want me to play zone, I'm not going to be very good. I mean, that would follow suit. That's how a guy with a fixed mindset would probably think. Versus, I played mostly press in college, but I haven't had the opportunity to play zone yet. But when I do, I'm going to be just as good at that as I am playing press.
And then I would say the third way that a guy can differentiate himself is his body language. And what wears guys out when they go to the combine is they're being scrutinized 24/7 for 4+ days. So your body language when you're walking in the hall, when you're going to meetings, when you're grabbing lunch, when you're going to the weight room over at the convention center, when you're going to Lucas Oil on the field, how you handle every single challenge they throw at you. And what is your body language? What kind of message are you sending to the teams? Between drills, what kind of message are you sending to the teams? Are you sending a message of, hey, I'm a badass, I'm prepared, I'm going to ball out, and I'm the guy you should be wanting on your team? Are you having an attitude and a body language of, hey, I'm trying to do everything right, I'm hoping I do right, I really don't want to be here, I'm getting tired, bored, all the things that the guys actually do feel before it's all said and done. So when you look at a player perspective, how in the heck do you improve your stock? It's, positionally, and for a lot of guys, it's their speed. For quarterbacks, it might be their throwing more than their speed, unless they're a dual threat. It's their interviews. It's who they are as people, if the teams feel like they're a good fit. And lastly, it's their body language, because their bodies are talking to the teams all the time. And players sometimes forget that they're under the microscope 24/7. So let's look at it from the team perspective. So the team perspective is all the 32 teams except 2 are sending all their coaches, most of their front offices, and a variety of different people in those front offices. It's going to be a sports psychologist. It's going to be their trainer. It's going to be all their position coaches. It's going to be all their personnel guys. It's going to be their doctors. I mean, they bring everybody. And so the team's objective, they've already got their guys graded. They already know the ones they want to talk to at the combine. They've done their pre-combine evaluations of all the players that are at the combine. Some of the guys they've already rejected. Some of the guys they would covet in the first pick, but they may not be picking high enough to even be in consideration for that pick unless they do a massive trade-up. So they've got the guys they think that they may have an opportunity to draft, that they have a particular affinity for, that they want to do some more due diligence at the combine through the interview process, so they can make a determination about whether this guy is still going to be one of their guys. And so for the teams, this is a wonderful opportunity for these guys to weed guys out. It's a process of elimination for the teams. The other thing team guys do is they see their old friends from other teams, guys they've coached with before, worked with before. It's kind of a convention where everybody kind of gets together and everybody's undefeated. So all the teams are in a good mood. The teams that have had horrible 2019 seasons may also be fortunate enough to have great draft capital in the 2020 draft, so that they actually feel like they're really important because they maybe have 10, 12 picks that can early every round. They may be a potential trading partner for other teams as well. So everybody is undefeated. Every NFL team at the NFL Combine is undefeated. Everybody's got a little hop in their step. For those 7 or 8 teams that changed head coaches and staffs, they're happy because they get an opportunity to go build. And then Andy Reid, who's the Super Bowl champion coach, he's got a whole different perspective than perhaps maybe the Cleveland Browns or the Cincinnati Bengals. So for a coach like Andy Reid, he's looking for that missing part, maybe to add another tool to his toolbox on offense, maybe to replace a guy they don't want to pay the money to in free agency, and they're going to let him go. So they need to find a lesser cost alternative in the draft. So they're looking for perhaps maybe a D tackle. They don't end up re-signing Chris Jones, or if they don't franchise him, which they probably will do one of those two. Before I go to the agent's role, at the NFL Combine. Let's listen to a previous interview I've had with Harold Richardson, former general manager of the Atlanta Falcons and the Denver Broncos. No question. So let's go back to your days as a front office guy. You're in Indianapolis at the NFL Combine, and you're doing interviews, and you're obviously going to the stadium and doing the 40s and watching them perform as well. What was like your secret sauce, or what was the thing that you saw that maybe not everybody in your building saw that allowed you to have more input in the process? Because let's say, for example, let's say you're trying to get a good quarterback in a particular year, and you got it narrowed down to 4. What do you bring into the table, and what perspective do you have that allows you to try to figure out this guy's 1, this guy's 2, 3, and 4?
But number one, I think to me the most important things are what we just got through talking about, trying to establish what their attitude and approach to the game is. But physically, you can learn a lot of stuff, and quite frankly, I think you learn a lot more stuff out of looking at film than you do at Indianapolis. Indianapolis obviously can tell you a lot of things. It's raw numbers. How fast a guy runs in shorts doesn't necessarily equate to how he runs in the ball game. You know, how a guy throws the ball when he's standing back there with nobody rushing at him doesn't necessarily equate to how they react in the game. So those are the things that you have to kind of put together.
No doubt. So you mentioned that you get more out of game film, and I've had many NFL personnel people tell me that, 90% of the grade for a draft prospect is what he does on Saturdays, what he does in the games. And the 10% is kind of the icing on the cake and what they do in the evaluation process where, they've been coached up on how to interview. They've spent 6-8 weeks doing nothing but drinking water, not drinking booze, and staying dialed in on what they have to do at the Combine. So the Combine's not really the best reality. Because
it never was to me, because it's raw numbers, and raw numbers are important, but raw numbers are not the most important.
So now let's look at what agents do at the Combine. What in the heck do agents do at the Combine? Well, number one, they coach and mentor their clients that are in the Combine. They see them every day, see who they've been talking to, find out, take their temperature, build them up if they need it, help them understand what's important and what's not, help them kind of keep their eye on the target, help them understand that the main thing needs to be the main thing, not all these other things. You've got Nike and Adidas and everybody else shows up, and there's all this media. Some people get interviewed, some people don't. Some people get shoe stuff, some people don't. Some people get interviewed by teams, some players don't. Helping them stay focused so that regardless of whether they're on the positive side of all those things or on the negative side of all those things, they stay the course. They remember why they are there in the first place, and that the performance in their workout is ultimately going to be the most important thing. So helping them also recover from any type of situation that might have came up in an interview the night before so that they don't repeat that issue the next night. So let's say, for example, some coach or some GM asks one of your clients a really difficult question, and he didn't, he froze. Maybe he wasn't as transparent as he should have been. Maybe he wasn't as honest as he should have been. Maybe he wasn't as forthright as he should have been. You coach up on, hey, they already knew the answer before they asked you the question. So just got to remind them, hey, be honest, be real. They've made mistakes too. We're all human. We all make mistakes. And to help them understand that, hey, by being transparent, by being honest, by being real, they're going to like you better, they're going to trust you more, and you have a better opportunity to be a member of their organization. Taking that approach than hiding, telling half-truths, any of those type of actions is not going to help you. The other thing agents do is they focus on talking to teams about their veteran free agents, whether they're unrestricted, restricted, lining up opportunities for your clients, trying to get deals done with the teams on. If your client is not getting the money and the offers that you would like from the team he's on, you're looking for other opportunities with other teams. We also go to the NFLPA agent seminar every year. This year is the biggest year in 9 years because we're going to go over what the new wrinkles are in the proposed new CBA. They put it out there to the public and put it out to us last week what the critical terms were. But typically at the NFLPA conference, you find out some of the small print of the new CBA proposed terms. And so that'll be a big part of the agent process this year. And then I think the other thing that agents do and that I've done over the years is you find out what's going to happen in the future for your clients that are under contract that are currently on teams. So you start thinking a year or two ahead about, hey, you've got a guy who's doing very well. His contract's not coming up till 2021. You want to start those conversations with his current team right now to find out, is he a guy that's going to be a nucleus player in their plans? Is he a guy that they want to keep in the fold and potentially want to do an extension early, or is he just a guy? And he might be an awesome player, but in their mind, he's just a guy. And if he's just a guy, they're probably looking to draft somebody at his position this year to bring him in and get him through his rookie year. So after contract's up, they slide in that draft pick and your guy's gone. So it's always a good idea to be talking a year or two in advance about what your client's future is with the organization he's with. And then the other thing is you make connections with other agents, you make connections with the media, you reconnect with those guys and just build relationships, because a lot of what agents do, it's about relationships in all different directions, not just the teams. Let's talk about the mindset. Let's talk about pro mindset for a NFL prospect going to Indianapolis for the 2020 Combine. And what are the challenges he's going to face that perhaps even his agent, his trainer, and anybody else involved has failed to share with him? One of the things they've got to be able to control is their excitement. They've got to control their boredom, because they're going to go through both of those feelings. They've also got to deal with losing their rhythm on training. Even though their trainer may fly in, set up shop at the convention center, it's not the same. And even walking back and forth between Lucas Oil, the convention center, the Union Station, and the player hotel, it's sometimes 15, 20, 25 degrees, and it's not Southern California. Going back to the biggest challenges. The biggest challenges for players in terms of having a pro mindset is the mental beatdown these players experience from second guessing everything they do. So if they did the bench press and they did 23 and they were hoping to do 27, all of a sudden they're not comparing 23 to 0. They're comparing 23 to what their expectations were, which were 27. And in reality, what they should look at the bench press as is a pass-fail. For certain positions, as long as you do a certain number, you're good. You really don't get any extra brownie points if you do more. So if you go do, every now and then you'll see a guy that'll do 43 reps of the bench press and everybody's excited, but then the kid's not even drafted. It's because he wasn't a top echelon player, but he was more weight room strong than he was functionally strong. And he could do it in weight room, but it didn't translate onto the field. And so a way to help your guys not get beat down is to check in with them, stay on top of it, help them understand that it's a process and that they can't be second-guessing themselves on everything they're doing. So it doesn't matter if it's an IQ test, a personality test, a drug test, an interview, an interaction with an NFL guy. They have to the most important thing is what's next. Focus on what's next, because what's done and over, it's over. Can't go back and redo it. Same thing on workout day. Once you get into the flow of the workout, I've never met a player that was like, wow, I ran so fast I can't believe it was me. That's faster than I've ever run in my life. I've never had a player that got a personal best. The environment is such that you never do your best. You have a perfect climate in Phoenix or Dallas or Boca or wherever you're training, and you go to Indianapolis and you have the imperfect climate. It's designed to make the players uncomfortable. It's designed to not bring out the best in them. So as a player, you want to give it your best, you want to do your best, and you want to think about the next one. And I think the other challenge for players is interaction with the media. Some players get a lot of media focus. Take a guy like Tua. getting a lot of media focus and prep for the combine. Not even going to work out. Can't work out. But he's still getting a lot of media focus, and people are speculating on which team does he want to play for? Why does he want to be a Cowboy? How does he compare to Herbert? Is he the best quarterback in the draft? Is he injury prone? All those types of things. And I think as a young man, you have to take it one step at a time with the media, answer their questions to the best of your ability. Don't tell them too much. Only give them enough to satisfy their question. And keep in mind that they don't turn in a card in Vegas on draft weekend in April. But they do have a tremendous amount of influence. So some teams will actually use the media as a trial balloon about a certain player to see how their current quarterback is going to respond if they drafted a quarterback in the first round, to see how the fan base is going to respond if they think about drafting a controversial player. Back in the day, teams just did what they did and the media responded. In today's times, the teams draft the guy hypothetically in the media and then measure the response from the parties that they care about, whether it be their fans, their team, their players, and then they make a decision on draft weekend whether or not to actually draft that player if they have the opportunity to, based upon that feedback. So there's almost like a beta testing that goes on by the NFL teams utilizing the media, and the media does the same thing. They try to influence the teams into doing certain things from time to time. If the media is very convincing and the fans follow suit, sometimes it can have an influence on the GM and the head coach when they put in the card in April. Let's talk about the critical factors and issues that players have to make decisions about sometimes before they even get to Indianapolis. And for some guys, it's whether to work out or not. Sometimes that's related to recovery from an injury. Sometimes it's draft status. You have more to lose than you have to gain by working out at the combine. Most players have more to gain than to lose, but there are a few that have more to lose than to gain. Do they work out or do they not? The other one is not every player, but a lot of players have skeletons in their closet. How do they respond to the media? How do they respond to the teams in the interviews with respect to that issue? Do they tell the truth? Do they tell a half-truth? Do they deny it? Do they put a spin on it? Do they blame someone else? All those things are decisions that players have to make in a premeditated fashion before they show up in Indianapolis. And my recommendation is to tell the truth. Don't tell them more than they need to know, but tell the truth. They already know the answers before they ask the question. Another one is some players, unfortunately, have a deeper injury history than others. Like Tua is one of those guys that has a pretty significant injury history. There's no disputing the fact that he's had those injuries. The question is he, quote unquote, injury prone, or is it just one of those things where he's already got his injuries out of the way and he might go another 15, 18 years without any further serious injuries? That's a question that the teams have to ask. That's a dilemma that the player has to respond to, because obviously most injuries you can't control them. You know, if you get tackled a certain way and fracture an ankle, tear a knee up, whatever it may be, it is what it is. But depending on your mindset, depending on your response, depending on your mojo, a player can convince a team that it was, hey, that stuff's behind him. And other players can be more victimized, and it's where the teams kind of write him off and take him a lot later in the draft because they see him as a guy that's more injury prone. And wrapping up the 2020 NFL Combine, a couple of the fun topics for the 2020 Combine are, and it always is this way every year, who are the quarterbacks? Who are the guys? Is Tua the best? Is Burrow the best? Is Herbert the best? Is there somebody else not named one of those three that's better than those three? Is Eason moving up the charts? Is Love after the Senior Bowl moving up the charts? And it really boils down to scheme fit, personality fit, culture fit. So even though the prognosticators and the draft media are putting out there that this guy's better than that guy or this guy doesn't have enough arm, Burrow The only question with him really is, does he have arm talent consistent with an NFL franchise quarterback? I don't know what that means. I really don't. Does Drew Brees think he's going to go to the Hall of Fame? Might throw for 80,000 yards. Does Tom Brady? He's the GOAT. So I think, the deal is there are so many quarterbacks that have arm talent that never play, that maybe play for a year and bust, but they got the arm talent. So I think the thing that everybody likes to do, teams included, is they like to be myopic about a couple things so that they can justify their decision. Oh, this guy's got arm talent, so we're going to take him over this guy. I think that's a big mistake. I think you've got to look at the totality of the talent. You've got to look at the personality on the field, off the field. You got to look at the work ethic. You have to look at the mindset. You have to look at his passion. You have to look at his motivation. All the things I talk about with pro mindset, I would put every one of those quarterbacks through that 7-step test and see how they come out. I'm not going to tell you who I think is the best quarterback. It's not my job. But I think that if they can do it in college, and they can do it at a high level in college, with elite players going against elite players, they're most likely going to be able to do it against the pros. And so one of the biggest mistakes I see by NFL teams is the ones that they see a guy that's got the prototypical size and arm talent, if we're talking about quarterbacks, but they don't win. They always say, hey, well, it was the defense. They didn't have a good defense. Well, there was a quarterback that came out of Kansas State a handful of years ago, went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a first rounder, and his name is escaping me. But he didn't have a winning record in high school. One of the few quarterbacks at K-State during the Bill Snyder regime that didn't have a winning record, and yet he still comes out early, goes in the first round, and didn't have a winning record in the NFL. So I think the question is, was that a shocker? And when guys are winners, guys are leaders, guys are ballers in college, they have an excellent chance to do the same thing at the next level. I want to thank you for listening today. I'm excited about this year's Combine. There's a lot of things going on, especially with the CBA. So I want you guys to enjoy watching the Combine this year. It'll be interesting to see who the guys are that get Combine buzz. Maybe run a lot faster than people expected. But Combine every year is a big part of the NFL offseason. And I think that the Combine and the draft are probably the two biggest institutions that the NFL has during the offseason to keep football alive and keep football at the front of the sports fans' minds throughout the offseason.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. 5 stars, of course. You can follow us on our website, ProMindsetPodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.